Why did no one salute her when she walked into the room? Why did the pilots who owed her their lives barely know her name? Because some legends don't announce themselves. They drift in like desert wind, quiet, unnoticed, until the moment the mounts themselves. They drift in like desert wind, quiet, unnoticed, until the moment the sky starts falling. Major Evelyn Ross was one of those legends, but at Black Ridge Air Force Base, most people just called her Ma'am when they noticed her at all. Buried deep in the Nevada desert, where sandstorms outnumbered ceremonies and silence stretched for miles, Black Ridge didn't breed soft soldiers. It bred ghosts, people who came to serve and stayed because the outside world had forgotten them. Evelyn fit right in. She didn't smile much, but she wasn't unfriendly. She spoke when needed, moved with purpose, and always seemed to know something others didn't. Her boots were always polished, her reports always filed early, her aircraft flawless, and yet, ask anyone at the base about her, and they'd hesitate. She's admin, right? No, I think she handles logistics. Isn't she retiring soon? None of them knew. None of them really knew, because Evelyn didn't need to be known. She lived in a room above the supply depot, a small one. She kept it clean, bare, one photo hung on the wall, an old black and white of a man in uniform. Her father, Colonel David Ross, he died in Vietnam. Evelyn had been 14. She hadn't cried at the funeral. She just watched as the flag was folded and whispered a promise to herself. I'll fly better than anyone ever expects. And I won't need a parade when I do it. That promise lived in her bones. It pushed her through the academy, through deployments no one spoke of, through flights in places that didn't exist on maps. She didn't collect medals, she collected hours in the sky, and when others ran toward applause, she ran toward discipline, because for Evelyn, the job wasn't about glory. It was about precision, about doing it right so no one else had to die. But things were changing at Black Ridge. New pilots were arriving, younger, eager, loud. They filled the mess hall with their swagger and chatter. Their stories were too big for the truth, and still, they didn't notice the woman reviewing fuel checklists at 0600 sharp every morning, alone. Lieutenant Brandon Webb certainly didn't. Fresh out of flight school, face barely old enough to shave. He had the grin of a rookie and the nerves to match. On his first day, he passed Evelyn without a glance. Thought she was some kind of records officer. Everyone did. Until the day the jet called for help. It happened fast, 9:13 a.m. The emergency alarm blared across the base. Radios crackled. Screens lit up. Eagle 17. Declaring emergency. Losing pressure, hydraulics failing. I can't stabilize. Repeat, I can't stabilize. The control room froze. Second Lieutenant Brandon Webb. Third solo flight. Altitude dropping. Fuel leaking. Right aileron jammed. The base scrambled. Where's the nearest tanker? Too far. Where's the rescue team? Grounded. Who's in the air? No one, and then footsteps, measured, calm, like someone arriving late to a dinner. Not a disaster. Evelyn Ross stepped into the control room with her helmet under one arm, hair pulled back tight, eyes steady. What's his altitude? She asked. 26,000. Dropping fast. How far out? 215 miles. Fuel's critical. He's got maybe 23 minutes. Evelyn didn't flinch. She turned to the base commander. Stratotanker 117 is fueled and ready. I can reach him in 12. You haven't flown a refuel up in... I know what I've flown, she said. Calm. Final. No one argued. Outside, the desert wind howled. Inside Hangar 4. The massive KC-135 Stratotanker came to life with a roar. The kind that shakes your teeth and your thoughts. Evelyn climbed aboard without ceremony. A technician tried to stop her. Ma'am, wait, aren't you? She clicked her. Chin strap. I'm the only one who can reach him in time. Moments later, the tanker thundered down the runway and lifted into the air. And just like that, The woman no one noticed became the only hope a falling jet had left up in the sky. Brandon Webb was fighting for his life. His oxygen levels were dipping. His trim wouldn't hold. The aircraft bucked with turbulence. "I think I'm going to lose her," he whispered into the radio, eyes blurring with sweat and fear. And then came a voice, clear, unshaken. "You're not panicking, you're flowing, and I've got you." It was Evelyn, somehow already airborne, already closing the distance. "We're going to do this together," she said. "Stay with me." In the control tower, officers watched as the radar screen showed the impossible. A lone KC-135, charging through headwinds, chasing a fighter jet spiraling toward the Earth. In most cases, mid-air refueling was like threading a needle. In daylight, in calm air, with two fully functional aircraft, this wasn't that. This was a Hurricane Ballet 1 jet crippled, one built for fuel, not maneuvering, both fighting the exciting day. Sky. But Evelyn had done harder things in worse places. She didn't speak of those things. They lived in her personnel file, buried in the margins. Sandstorm landings, emergency evac flights through hostile fire, saving lives and disappearing before the medals could catch up. She didn't care about recognition. She only cared about results. Back in the sky, Brandon saw her, just ahead, glinting against the sun, massive, steady, and impossibly close. "You flew that thing out here alone?" he gasped. "I told you," she said. "I've got you." The boom lowered. The jets danced inches from each other, one veteran pilot with nerves of steel, one rookie with shaking hands. Brandon's voice trembled. "I can't. I'm sorry. Breathe," she said. Eyes on the horizon. "You're not alone up here." Click. The connection held. Fuel flowed. The room back at Black Ridge erupted in cheers. But Evelyn didn't smile. "Stay on me," she said. "We're not done yet." And somewhere, deep in the sky, with alarms still blinking and wind still screaming, Brandon Webb realized something. He believed her. How do you guide a plane that's breaking apart when the pilot inside is breaking too? You don't fly the jet. You fly the fear. Evelyn Ross had done both before, but never with someone this young, this panicked, this close to the edge. From the cockpit of the KC-135, she kept her voice level, controlled, gentle, like gravity hadn't turned against them both. "Webb, I need you to keep your nose level," she said. "Throttle steady. Let me come to you." The fighter jet in front of her lurched again. Rolling slightly to the left, it looked like it might snap in two. The storm winds were merciless, stabbing sideways at both aircraft, howling across the desert sky. "I'm trying," Webb stammered. "She won't hold my trim's knot." Responding, "I know," Evelyn said. "That's why I'm here." Back in the boom pod of the KC-135, the youngest airman on base had his hands hovering over the manual release. He looked up through the intercom camera at Evelyn. "Ma'am," he said, his voice shaking, "this isn't safe." "It's never safe," she replied calmly. "Just hold your line. I'll do the rest." Outside, the nose of her tanker dipped. The boom extended, inches. That's all they had to work with. Any shift, any miscalculation, and they'd collide midair. Two massive aircraft turned to fireballs. But Evelyn didn't flinch. Her hands worked the controls like a sculptor. Small inputs, bare corrections, her jaw locked, her eyes unblinking. This wasn't luck. This was decades of experience. This was every quiet hour she spent on the flight line. Every system she learned better than the engineers who built it. And then, click, the boom connected, fuel flowed. Back in the control tower, silence exploded into noise. Officers cheered, headsets buzzed. One technician threw their arms in the air, like they'd scored a touchdown. But Evelyn didn't react. "Stay with Webb," she said. "Don't disengage. Let it fill." Through his smeared goggles, Webb saw it. The KC-135 beside him, its massive wings slicing through the sky like armor. The woman inside? Calm as stone, Why'd you come for me? He asked, the question barely above a whisper. Her answer was simple. Because you needed me, and no one else was close enough. The refuel lasted 63 seconds. That's all. Enough to give the fighter jet a chance. Enough to reset the clock on death. But just when it seemed like they'd made it, when Brandon Webb let himself breathe, the jet jerked again. Hard. The left wing dipped. Warning screamed across the dash. Aileron failure. Stall risk. Altitude critical. No. He cried out. I can't, she's rolling, I'm losing lift. From the KC-135, Evelyn saw it. She knew the signs. A downward spiral. Fast, violent. Unrecoverable in 30 seconds or less. Most pilots would panic. She didn't, Webb. She said firmly, do not yank the stick. Counter-yaw with trim. It's not responding. I'm coming under you. Don't fight me. What, ma'am? But Evelyn Ross was already diving. The KC-135 dropped beneath the F-15 like an eagle scooping a wounded bird from the sky. In the tower, one controller gasped. She's going to try to push the damn jet up. Insanity. The KC-135 wasn't built for maneuvers like this. It was a fuel tanker, not a rescue bird. It didn't dive. It didn't intercept. It didn't catch other jets mid-fall. But Evelyn Ross wasn't thinking about the design manual. She was thinking about how much space lay between Webb's jet and the desert floor. Too little, not enough. Throttle back, she said. Let gravity guide you. We're falling. No, she said. And somehow, it sounded like a lullaby. We're gliding. The stratotanker slid beneath the crippled fighter. Close, too close. The sensors screamed. The air shook, but Evelyn held her nerve, held her line, held Brandon. Webb's last hope in the space between instinct and physics. Ride the cushion, she said. Let the air do the work. Nose up. Just a hair. Silence, and then Webb's voice. Leveling. I'm stabilizing. Evelyn exhaled. Good. You've got this. We're slowing. Together. She had done this before. Not the exact maneuver. No pilot had. Not like this. But she'd flown through death zones with no backup. Landed transports. With failed engines, carried home wounded soldiers when others turned back. Somewhere, in her file, there were handwritten notes. Margins that said things like, saved 12 lives, refused to debrief, walked straight to next shift. Evelyn Ross didn't file for medals. She filed for fuel logs and aircraft maintenance reports. The sky was her reward. The landing, her closure now. She was buying Brandon Webb both. Altitude holding at 14,000. She called out. Webb didn't speak, but she knew he was there. She could feel his control stabilizing. And just as hope reappeared, the storm hit, a violent gust, a sharp yaw. The F-15 twisted again. The tanker jolted, proximity alarms screamed. Below them, jagged ridges, rocks that could slice through steel. Inside the cockpit, Evelyn growled through clenched teeth. Webb, hold that line. I'm trying. She fought back against the wind, against chaos, against the margin of error shrinking by the second. The tanker rattled. Her heartbeat didn't. In the boom pod, the young airman stared at the screen. Both aircraft bouncing like marbles in a jar. He reached for the intercom. Ma'am, what if we don't make it? Evelyn glanced at the camera, smiled. Then tell command I went flying. That's enough. No bravado. No false promises, just flight, just focus. Just Evelyn Ross, the ghost of Black Ridge, dragging a broken pilot back from the edge. They flew like that for miles. Fighting air. Fighting odds. Fighting the voice in Brandon Webb's head that still whispered, you're not going to make it. But above that fear was something else now. A steadier voice. Her voice. Guiding, grounding, gripping. Him from the inside like an anchor in a storm. He'd never forget that voice. And neither would the sky. How do you fly straight when your bones are shaking, your jet is dying, and your mind keeps whispering, you won't make it? You don't, unless someone flies with you. Second Lieutenant Brandon Webb had never felt so alone in his life until he realized he wasn't. Her voice was still there, like a steady heartbeat across the combs. Like the hum of a machine that refused to break down. Major Evelyn Ross. She didn't raise her voice, didn't bark orders. She guided, like she'd done this before, like this was what she was born to do. Webb, look out your left, she said. He blinked. Sweat blurred his vision. What? What do you see? He turned. Mountains, a high ridge line, maybe 30 miles off. Good, she said. You're not drifting east anymore. Your stabilizer's holding. Now trim 5 degrees left. Gentle pressure. No yanking. He adjusted, hands trembling. The F-15 groaned, but responded. Nose eased upward. Altitude ticked. 15,000, 15,300. Still low, but it was rising. You're still with me? She asked. He nodded, then realized she couldn't see him. Yes, he said, voice cracking. Every inch. For 5 minutes, they flew in near silence. No chatter, no cheers, just wind, just work. Webb followed her every instruction, matched. Every minor movement of the KC-135 ahead. It was surreal. He didn't know her. Had only heard whispers about the ghost pilot who never spoke at briefings. The woman who lived above the depot. The one who didn't show up in squadron photos. But here she was, flying beside him like a guardian he hadn't earned. Ma'am, he said quietly. Why me? There was a pause. Then her voice, soft but certain. Because you're worth saving, just like the others. The others? He asked. She didn't answer right away then. Every name you don't know. Every face you never met. They were scared too. They just needed someone to fly with them long enough to make it home. Webb stared at the controls, at the horizon, at the tanker that held steady like a mountain with wings. Was that your job? He asked. Flying broken birds? No, she said. That was just who I was when it mattered. They broke through the edge of the storm, and suddenly it was light. The sun tore through the clouds in gold and white. The sky opened wide. Like it had been waiting for a moment, Brandon forgot the fear, forgot the failure, forgot the alarms still flickering yellow. He laughed loud, breathless, shocked, not because anything was funny, but because he was still alive, still flying, still breathing, and somehow the world hadn't ended. Evelyn didn't laugh. She just stayed with him, flying his blind spot, quiet, present, unshaken, back at Black Ridge. The tower patched through. Eagle 17 and Tanker 117. You're clear to descend. Runway 3L is yours. Evelyn keyed her mic. Copy. We'll bring it home. Brandon hesitated. Ma'am, I'm still not sure this bird can land. You don't have to be sure, she said. You just have to follow my lead. And so he did. The KC-135 dipped first. A gentle descent, graceful, calculated. Evelyn adjusted flaps, throttle, trim-like. She was drawing a map in the air. Webb followed each movement, watched her engines flare, her wings catch lift, her gear drop. He mirrored every motion, and when his fingers trembled, he remembered her voice. Let the air do the work. Ride the cushion, let her arrive. Below them, the strip waited. Fire trucks lined the edge. Medics stood by. Mechanics frozen mid-step, holding their breath. The KC-135 touched down first. A soft bounce, then grip, then silence. Moments later, the F-15 followed, one wing low, smoke trailing, but wheels to ground. Brakes hissing, it stopped. He had landed. He was alive, and he owed every breath to the woman who refused to let him fall. Inside the cockpit, Webb sat motionless, drenched in sweat, shaking, laughing again, but now through tears, and in his headset, one final line. Told you I had you. Then silence, the kind that means everything is finally still. He climbed down. The ladder, legs barely holding. Crew rushed toward him. A medic tried to offer oxygen. Someone else waved a stretcher. He ignored them all, because down the runway, the KC-135 was rolling to a halt. The ramp dropped, and then she stepped out. Major Evelyn Ross, helmet tucked under her arm, flight suit dusty, boots heavy on the tarmac. And suddenly, the entire hangar froze. People stopped mid-step. Conversations died. Fire crews turned. Maintenance staff removed headsets. It was like watching a ghost step out of a legend and onto the earth. Most of them had never seen her, only heard stories, whispers, rumors. But now she was real, walking toward Brandon Webb without hesitation. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. She beat him to it. "You held her together," she said. "Nice flying." I didn't," he stammered. "You saved me." She tilted her head. "You listened. That's what saved you." Behind them, a senior officer approached. Colonel Pierce, base commander. Face unreadable, voice tight. "Major Ross," he said. "I don't recall authorizing this deployment." She didn't blink. "You didn't." The air tightened. Pierce glanced at the battered jet, at the runway, at the silence. "You know what happens when chain of command is ignored." She nodded. "A pilot dies." Another pause. Then, surprisingly, he nodded. "Hell of a flight?" She shrugged slightly. "It could have been smoother." The hangar cracked. Laughter. Hesitant. Then rolling, crew exhaled. One technician started clapping. Others joined. It wasn't a cheer. It was respect. Thick in the air. Heavy like fuel vapor. Invisible, but everywhere. And Evelyn Ross stood at the center of it. Unmoved. Not because she didn't care, but because she didn't need it. She turned to Webb. "Get checked out, then rest." "Yes, ma'am." "The next time you fly," she added, "I want your hands steady, from takeoff to touchdown." He swallowed, nodded. "Will I see you again?" She gave him a rare half-smile, subtle as wind. "You'll see me when you need to." And just like that, she walked back toward the hangar. No parade, no ceremony, no applause following her heels. Just a legend fading back into the shadows. The same way she came, but something had shifted. Everyone on that tarmac, rookie and veteran alike, had seen her now. Not a rumor, not a myth. A pilot. The one who flew into the storm. When no one else could, and no one would ever forget it. What happens when a ghost steps out of the shadows and leaves everyone staring at the truth they never saw coming? She didn't speak to the media, didn't wave from a podium, didn't pose for photos. But by nightfall, the world was already talking. About her, military forms lit up like runway lights. Veteran pilot intercepts falling F-15. KC-135 performs unthinkable mid-air save. Who is Major Evelyn Ross? The headlines spread fast. Civilians watched sterile news reports. Aviation blogs guessed her background. Even the official Air Force channel posted something brief. Today, a routine training flight became an emergency response operation. All personnel safe, special commendation pending. But that wasn't the real story. Not even close, because none of them knew what Brandon Webb had heard in his headset as his jet fell. They hadn't felt her voice like steel wrapped in silk pulling him back from the edge, and she wasn't going to tell them, because Evelyn Ross never told her story. Not then, not ever. She filed her report just like always, one page, sparse, emotionless, just facts. Then she left the operations building without a word. No interview, no post-op discussion, just a long walk across the flight line as the wind picked up again. The desert was quiet, and so was she, but Black Ridge wasn't. The base buzzed. Pilots who'd once ignored her were suddenly remembering small things, like how she always corrected their logs before the instructors caught the mistake, how she left cryptic notes in simulator reviews, how she once handed a rookie a checklist and saved his wing from snapping midair. Those stories resurfaced now, not as gossip, but as reverence in hangar corners and maintenance bays. People spoke her name differently. She really flew that tanker solo? She dove under a falling F-15? She caught him? It sounded impossible. It was impossible, but it had happened, because the pilot they all overlooked had done what no one else even considered. That night, Brandon Webb sat alone near the edge of the flight line. He wasn't ready to go back to the dorms. His legs dangled off a stack of wheel chocks. The desert wind stung his face. His F-15 sat nearby scarred, one wing blackened, but intact, alive, like him. He kept replaying it, the dive, the scream of alarms, the tanker that came from nowhere, her. A voice broke the silence behind him. You look like someone trying to outstare a ghost. He turned. Sergeant Maria Danner, senior crew chief, rumored to drink jet fuel and spit out torque specs. She had grease on her boots and thunder in her voice. But tonight, she was just holding coffee. Webb nodded. She saved my life, Danner sipped. Yeah, she does that. You know her? Danner smirked. You know what we used to call her? Back when I was a cadet? What? The Echo. He raised an eyebrow. Why? Because you'd only hear about her. After she was gone, some busted landing, some emergency. No one ever saw it happen. But there was always a whisper. Ross was there. She looked out at the dark sky. Sometimes I wondered if she was even real. Webb swallowed. Why would someone like that stay hidden? Maria's answer was quiet. Maybe because she wasn't chasing stars, just doing what needed to be done. He sat with that, let it settle. Then slowly, he reached into his jacket, pulled out a folded piece of paper, a sketch, lines, angles, arrows. It was rough drawn from memory. The storm, the dive, the refuel, the glide. The impossible maneuver that brought him home. Maria leaned in. You going to frame that? He shook his head. No, I'm going to learn it. Every inch, then pass it on. Maria smiled. That's the trick, kid. She never needed you to remember her. Just a lesson. Meanwhile, back in the debriefing room, Colonel Pierce closed the blinds. He didn't call the press, didn't pull rank. He just gathered the senior pilots and leadership team for a quiet, closed-door meeting. There was one empty chair in the room. It had her name on it, but everyone knew she wouldn't show. Pierce stood in front of them. We've all flown with good people, he said, but once in a while, someone reminds us what this job is really about. No toasts, no slogans, just silence. The kind Evelyn Ross would have respected. They raised glasses, water, coffee, whatever was in reach, and then they went back to work. The next morning, the walls of the simulator room had a new inscription. It wasn't official. No memo, no ceremony, just a line etched quietly in the paint above the monitors. Trust the sky, but follow the voice. Cadets asked where it came from. No one answered, but every pilot at Black Ridge knew what it meant. Because that voice didn't need call signs or medals or fame. It just needed one thing. A jet in trouble and someone worth saving. Why do some people walk away from the spotlight, even when they've earned it 100 times over? Because for them, being seen was never the goal. Being useful was. That was Evelyn Ross. And if the base hadn't known it before now, they couldn't unsee it. The following week, Black Ridge felt different. Subtle. No official announcements, no promotion ceremony, no plaque on the wall, but in the hangars, whispers became respect. Instructors quoted her flight patterns. Trainees asked for Ross-style simulations. Maintenance techs triple-checked their work because rumor said Evelyn could hear a bad bearing from 3 hangars away. She didn't speak in meetings, didn't lead formations, but everyone started flying. Like she was watching for Brandon Webb, everything had changed. He'd walked onto base just a face in the crowd. Green, eager, unproven. Now, people nodded when they passed. The medics called him Eagle 17. The crew chief personally signed off on his next aircraft, but all he could think about was her voice. Let her arrive. Ride the cushion. You're not alone up here. Those words weren't in the training manual. but they'd saved his life. Now he carried them like scripture. He found himself returning to the same spot near the chalks every night, just to think, to breathe, to listen. And sometimes, though he never saw her, he felt like she was out there, somewhere in the dark, watching. One afternoon, a package appeared in his room. No label, no sender, just a single flight binder, heavy, worn, lined with red ink and cryptic. Notes inside the front cover. 2 words were written in careful, steady handwriting. Study everything. He didn't have to ask who it came from. It wasn't just checklists or procedures. It was more than that. Every note had intent, precision. Even the margins held meaning. Compensate for wind shear and microbursts. Don't trust diagnostics, trust feel. Read the aircraft's silence. It was a blueprint, not just for flying, but for surviving and for something else. For becoming the kind of pilot who didn't need permission to do the right thing. The deeper he read, the more he understood her. Why she didn't attend the barbecues, why she turned down awards, why she walked past applause like it was background. Noise, for her. Every saved life was its own honor. Every landing without headlines was enough. He remembered what Colonel Pierce had said in the quiet debriefing. Once in a while, someone reminds us what this job is really about. That someone wasn't standing in front of a flag giving speeches. She was probably wiping down her own aircraft alone before the mechanics could get to it. And that binder? It wasn't just a gift. It was a torch. Other pilots began to notice changes in Brandon. His pre-flight routines grew sharper, his landing scores cleaner, his questions deeper. He stopped trying to impress and started trying to understand. One day, a new cadet asked, "Hey, who trained you?" He paused for a long moment, then just said, "A voice." Meanwhile, Evelyn kept moving, as she always had, quietly, deliberately, invisibly. But there was one change she couldn't quite ignore. Every time she walked the tarmac, someone looked up. A salute, a nod, a glance held a second longer, not out of fear, but out of knowing. One mechanic, a gruff old tech named Reynolds, waited for her after a routine systems check. "I heard what you did," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "Which time?" He smiled. "Doesn't matter. We've always known. We just didn't say it out loud." She adjusted her gloves. "You still don't need to," he nodded, respectfully. "We know." And then he stepped aside to let her pass in the radar room. 2 young controllers quietly marked Ross as a call sign in their internal watch lists, just in case she ever needed immediate clearance again. In the simulator bay, instructors began running Eagle emergency protocols, a new training model built from Brandon Webb's after-action account. They didn't call it the Ross drill, but everyone knew she didn't attend those trainings, didn't approve the changes, didn't sign off on anything. But one night, passing through a dim hallway outside the training center, Evelyn paused at the window and watched a group of cadets try to recreate the maneuver. It was clumsy, sloppy. They'd never pull it off in real life. But they were trying. They were learning. She stood there for a long time, then turned and disappeared. Back into the dark. Later that week, a civilian contractor stopped her near the supply gate. "You Ross?" She nodded once. He squinted. "Didn't think you were real. Most people don't." He stepped aside. "Guess we were wrong." That night, Evelyn pulled out an old flight map. The creases were deep, the ink fading, but one set of coordinates had been circled years ago. She stared at it, quiet, thoughtful, then drew a new circle just beside it, marked it. Web save confirmed. She didn't write often, but when she did, it was for the record. And now, the record had grown. How do you honor someone who doesn't want to be honored? You don't throw a parade. You don't give them a medal. You change how you fly. 2 weeks after the emergency, the base received an official memo from command headquarters. It was short, standard. Language polished, almost sterile. Major Evelyn Ross is to be formally recognized for exceptional leadership and valor in response to in-flight. Emergency Eagle 17. It listed coordinates, fuel logs, altitude data, not a single word about fear or instinct, or the voice that saved a rookie from falling out of the sky, because no report could capture that. Evelyn Ross read the memo once, then placed it in a drawer. Didn't frame it, didn't show anyone, didn't even mention it to the commander. She had other things to do, like replacing an old navigation panel on a bird that no one else trusted, or reviewing trainee flight logs after midnight, marking only what truly mattered. You flared too soon. Next time, feel the crosswind before the gauges catch it. It was the kind of instruction that didn't make cadets proud. It made them better. Meanwhile, Brandon Webb's world had quietly realigned. He no longer craved being the fastest or loudest. He started showing up early, staying late, asking quieter questions. His instructors noticed. He wasn't the kid who almost crashed anymore. He was becoming something else, a different kind of pilot, one shaped by silence and storms. In a simulator exercise one morning, a younger cadet panicked during a failure drill. Nosedive, fuel loss, the works. Webb stepped in calm fast, took the co-pilot's seat and talked the kid through it. Throttle back. Don't fight the fall. Glide. Let her arrive. The instructors didn't say anything. They didn't need to, because they'd heard those words before, and they knew exactly who they came from. There was no ceremony. But word of Evelyn's flight had reached beyond Black Ridge. Across other bases, stories surfaced, old ones. Transport missions that went off-grid, engine failures that miraculously recovered, pilots who swore someone unseen corrected their path. Whispered warnings saved lives, and every time, one name appeared in the margins. Ross. Command tried to formalize it. They offered her a promotion, a desk job, even a recruitment role in D.C. She declined all of it in the simplest terms possible. I serve better in the air. They tried again. She didn't answer. Just clocked in at Hangar 4, ran her pre-flight, and checked her gear like nothing had changed, because for her, it hadn't. One evening, Webb knocked on the door of the upper supply dorm. No one answered. He left a note instead. Thanks for the binder, I'll earn it, underneath. He drew the symbol she used to mark her personal notes, a small triangle, with a single line across the top altitude hold. He wasn't sure she'd even see it, but 3 days later, his cockpit checklist had a red mark beside it, circled, no note. She'd seen it. That was enough. Elsewhere on base, instructors quietly started calling it the Valkyrie pattern. Unofficial, of course. But when pilots ran simulations with fuel loss, altitude drops, or failed trim controls, they were taught one possible save. The dive intercept refuel maneuver. It was nearly impossible to pull off. Only one name had ever succeeded, but they taught it anyway, not to celebrate a hero. To prepare the next one, the phrase began appearing. In odd places, ride to cushion, scratched into flight locker doors, written in grease pen on tanker consoles, etched into the corner of a chalkboard. It wasn't doctrine. It was folklore. And that meant it would live longer than any official report. Colonel Pierce knew what was happening. He saw it in the way pilots treated checklists more seriously, how cadets talked about instinct and feel. Not just speed, she was changing them without saying a word. He passed her in the hallway one morning, stopped. You're teaching more now than you ever did in a classroom, he said. She raised an eyebrow. I never wanted to teach. Exactly, he said. That's why it's working. She didn't respond. Didn't need to. Later that week, a new pilot named Avery Salas joined the training rotation. Confident, sharp, a little too bold. In their first flight sim, she flared early. Missed a crosswind shift and nearly overcorrected into a stall. She stormed out of the room, frustrated. Webb followed her, said nothing at first. Then he handed her a folded slip of paper. You're not panicking, you're flowing. She read it twice. What is this? He looked out across the tarmac. A reminder. Avery didn't understand yet, but she would one day, when the sky started falling, and everything familiar turned to chaos. She'd remember those words, and maybe, just maybe, she'd hear that voice. Not in the headset, but in her bones, because that's what Evelyn Ross gave them. Not a speech, not a slogan, a standard, a way of flying, a way of being, one so quiet, so precise, so grounded in dignity, that it never had to ask for attention. It earned it, silently. What do you do when a legend leaves no shadow, only a path? You follow it, not to be like her, but to become the version of yourself she believed was possible. It had been a month since the emergency flight. Black Ridge was quieter now, steadier. The cadets still ran their drills. The instructors still barked critiques. The fuel line still hissed at dawn. But something was different. The base had recalibrated. Not because of a speech, but because of her. Evelyn Ross had returned to her rhythms. Same prep flights, same walk across the hangar, same quiet nods in the debriefing room. But those who were paying attention noticed small changes. She was more visible now. Not louder, just no longer invisible. She still declined interviews, still ignored emails from public affairs. When one officer joked that she could be the face of recruitment for women pilots, she simply replied, "I already am. They just don't know it." One night, Evelyn stood alone beside the KC-135 she flew that day. She rested her hand on the cold hull. It had been repainted, refueled, restocked. But she could still feel the storm in its bones. She closed her eyes, not to relive it, but to honor it. The way others honor fallen comrades or battles won. This wasn't a victory. It was a return. Inside the maintenance hangar, Brandon Webb found her. He didn't mean to. Was just walking the tarmac. Couldn't sleep. She didn't turn when he approached. Just said, "Still flying with your hands, or have your instincts kicked in yet?" He smiled. "Little of both." She nodded. "Good. Trust both. But always let instinct make the final call." They stood there in silence for a while. Then he spoke. "I don't think I thanked you." "Properly, you did." "When?" "When you listened." He pulled something from his jacket. It was a photo. The refuel moment, grainy, captured from the tower cam. The KC-135 beneath the F-15, both aircraft dancing with death. He held it out. "I thought you might want to keep it." She stared at it for a long time, then gently pushed it back. "No, why not?" "Because the sky didn't need proof, and neither do I." Webb hesitated, then quietly said, "Do you ever wonder why you're not more known?" Evelyn didn't flinch. "I'm not unknown. I'm unnecessary to the story. That's the goal." He frowned. "I think you're wrong." She turned to him, not angry, not dismissive, just honest. The mission was to save a pilot. We did. If they remember me, they forget the lesson. What lesson? That flying isn't about control. It's about surrender. He didn't understand it fully. Not yet, but he would, years later. When he'd guide his own squadron through a mechanical failure over the Baltic, when the clouds thickened and the radios cut out, he'd remember her words, he'd surrender, and he'd survive. At that moment, though, standing in the desert dark, he just nodded. "Thank you anyway," he said. This time, she accepted it, with a small breath, a subtle shift. In posture, that was as close to a "you're welcome" as anyone had ever gotten. The next morning, a quiet change happened. No announcement, no orders. Just a small black patch stitched onto the wall inside Hangar 4. A triangle, a single line across the top, altitude hold. It was her mark. Someone had embroidered it, placed it. In the corner behind the tanker's maintenance log. No name, no caption, but everyone knew. From that day forward, pilots touched it before walking out to their jets. Like a ritual, a nod to the invisible, a promise to fly with discipline, with feel, with heart. And still, Evelyn refused promotion, refused base transfer, refused to become anything other than what she already was. Until one day, a letter arrived. It wasn't from command. It wasn't from the Air Force at all. It was from the mother of a soldier she'd once flown out of Kandahar. Years ago, during a blacked-out evac under enemy fire, Evelyn had never spoken about that flight, not even to Pierce, but the letter knew. "I don't know your name," it read, "but someone told me a woman flew the bird that brought my son home. He didn't walk for 6 months. Now he runs. I just wanted you to know he named his daughter Evelyn." Evelyn stared at the letter for a long time, then folded it once, carefully, placed it inside the same drawer as the commendation memo she never accepted. She never replied, not with words. But the next morning, she flew 2 back-to-back tanker drills, personally calibrated the boom system, and rewrote a portion of the simulator training to correct a minor trim logic error no one else had noticed. That was her reply. Not thanks, just action. Black Ridge didn't change overnight, but slowly, surely, its heart started beating differently. Less noise, more intent. They called it the raw shift. A way of flying, a way of showing up, a way of saying, "I'm here, I'm ready. I don't need applause. I just need air." How does a legend disappear again after finally being seen? Quietly, because some people were never trying to be remembered. They were just trying to make sure you lived long enough to remember yourself. Months passed, seasons shifted, the desert stayed the same, but Black Ridge wasn't quite the same place anymore. The old-timers noticed it first. Checklist compliance went up. Simulator crashes went down. Egos dropped. Instincts rose. It wasn't about fear or reverence. It was alignment. The kind of shift that happens when someone holds the sky open long enough for others to fly through it. Evelyn Ross never changed her schedule. Still ran pre-flight at 0600. Still filed by hand. Still said, "Appreciate it," when someone offered her a ride to the mess hall. Then walked alone instead. But the way people saw her had changed. She wasn't a rumor anymore. She was a standard. New cadets arriving at Black Ridge often heard about the flight. Most didn't believe it at first. Wait, she dove a tanker beneath a falling F-15? Mid-refuel? In a storm? Alone? But the records were there. Incomplete, uncelebrated, but undeniable. And every once in a while, a young pilot would turn a corner and nearly run into her on the tarmac. Helmet in hand, jumpsuit dusty, eyes forward. They'd freeze. She'd nod. Then keep walking. Because she didn't need them to salute. She needed them to prepare. Inside Hangar 4, a new tradition had quietly taken hold. Every time a pilot passed a check ride or logged their first solo flight, they were handed a scrap of paper, no words. Just a symbol, a triangle, one line across the top, altitude hold, at first. No one explained it. Eventually, someone always did. The day finally came when she wasn't at pre-flight, didn't file her log, didn't appear in the debriefing room. Her locker was closed, clean, cleared. Just a note, taped to the inside, 4 words. "I'll see you up there." No farewell speech, no base announcement, no final flyover, just gone. A transfer slip filed quietly. No fanfare, not retirement, just movement. Because Evelyn Ross never stayed where she'd already done the work. Brandon Webb found out from Colonel Pierce. She hadn't told him either. She didn't ask for orders. Pierce said, didn't wait for permission. Just walked into my office one morning and said, "Sir, someone else needs me more now." "And you let her go?" Webb asked. Pierce exhaled. "You don't let Ross do anything. You just stay out of her way." Her flight binder was left behind, but only one note inside. "Don't copy my path. Make your own." That night, Brandon stood alone near the runway again. Same stack of chalks, same desert wind, only this time. He wasn't unsure anymore. He was ready, not to be her, but to honor the sky she flew. A voice stirred behind him. Sergeant Maria Danner again, coffee in hand. "She's gone, huh?" Webb nodded. "Yeah, Danner looked out at the horizon. You know what my favorite myth about her was? What? That she flew without instruments, said she could feel altitude in her bones. Webb smiled. Maybe she could. Danner shrugged. Or maybe she just trusted herself more than the machines. Pause. Or maybe she was the machine. They both laughed quietly, then fell into silence again. The kind of silence Evelyn left behind. Thick, alive, full of meaning. Later that week, a new phrase appeared above the simulator door, painted in small white lettering. No. Signature. Just a whisper, etched in steel. Sometimes, dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And from that day forward, every pilot who trained at Black Ridge learned one thing. You can have rank, you can have skill, you can have heart, but if you don't have discipline, the kind that flies into a storm with no guarantee of return, you're not ready. Not yet. They called her a hero, a ghost, a legend. But those who really knew the story, they just called her Pilot, the one who showed them how to fly like it meant something and how to disappear when the job was done. End.